turning darkest night to daylight. The rain-soaked street sparkling, neon lights dance to the burning flights. Those basement joints are bouncing, trading fours right up till sunrise. Rhythm changes and Cherokee, the table candles flicker in your eyes. This is where I long to be. This is what I dream. I'm gonna be just up, blowing some saxophone, grooving hard in some neon-lit bar. Ain't never thinking of home. Gonna be a jazz star. Flying high. Checking out the redhead, her lush lips smile and pale green eyes. Under the lights I'm glowing, the greatest chorus ever improvised. After the show we'll make out, digging tears down at the famous store, and then perhaps a nightcap. Stagger out into the misty dawn. This is where I long to be. This is what I dream. I'm gonna be just up, blowing some saxophone, grooving hard in some neon-lit bar. Ain't never thinking of home. Gonna be a jazz star. Flying high. She's waking up beside me, jaded memories of the night before. Her ginger curls unfurling, no greater life could ever be asked for. This is where I long to be. This is what I dream. I'm gonna be just up, blowing some saxophone, grooving hard in some neon-lit bar. Ain't never thinking of home. Gonna be a jazz star. Flying high.
Good evening, everybody. Let me just go and stop that. There we go. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Welcome to April 14th, 2019, Sunday Night Live with me, Johnny Lipsham, at johnnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Hope everybody is having a fine Sunday evening. It is 7 minutes past midnight here in Edinburgh, in Scotland, in the glorious United Kingdom, although we're kind of a little bit slightly less glorious at the moment, but I'm sure we'll fix that and normal service will be resumed, hopefully shortly. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. I'm on top chat. I need to be on live chat. There we go. That way I get to see everything. We have, I think, 14 people in the room at this moment in time. 8 minutes into the show. I apologize if you've been waiting around for the notification and all of that. YouTube seems to be pushing out notifications later and later for my live shows. I don't know why. It's just their servers, I guess. I don't know. I'll have to find out. I am part of the Creators Insider team, so I'm sure I'll just ask in there and see what I can find out. So yeah, so that's that really. That's YouTube in a nutshell. But yeah, we're here, and tonight's topic, if you're wondering what it's going to be, is going to be kind of, we're going to delve into the realms a little bit of harmony. This was a question that comes from my good friend Mike Neighbor over at Peace Valley Audio. And he asked if we could tackle a question dealing with adding notes to chords that exist above the octave. So things like ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, and alterations thereof, and alterations to any of the notes in existing chords, that kind of stuff. So that is what we're going to have a wee look at, and then of course we'll take all of your questions. So yeah, so that's kind of where we are. We've got 15 people in the room just now, which is awesome. And so yeah, so that's what we're going to look at tonight, and we'll get into that in just a minute. I've had a very, very busy day. I've been playing bass pretty much all day, which happens pretty much once a month. I was playing bass in my church this morning, and then I had some time with my daughter Anna. My wife had to take my son to a birthday party, so I had a wonderful time walking along the canal in the sunshine with my daughter whilst we ate our lunch. We had sausage rolls and that kind of thing. It was really nice. We had a really nice time together. Just walking along the banks of the canal that runs through the centre of Edinburgh, well, part of the centre of Edinburgh. And it was really nice. And we met some people, we chatted and, you know, found out a little bit about life on a barge. It was great. It was great fun. Just meeting people and talking to people. So, yeah, so that was kind of my day today. And then I've been working again this evening down in town. And got back, maybe an hour ago. So by the time I'd had dinner, a late dinner at that, I kind of realized, hang on a minute, I haven't had any time whatsoever to put out anything to advertise the show today. So if we have a small crowd here, that would not surprise me in the slightest. It's my own fault. I should have put out a notification this morning. I should have put out something on Facebook this morning, and I should have sent out an email, and I just totally was so busy. I just totally forgot all about doing that. So I'm sorry about that, folks. So here we are at 11 minutes past midnight here. So we're going to get into the subject. And it sounds complicated. And, you know, a lot of people think, you're getting into the realms of jazz harmony there. Well, actually, before there was jazz harmony, there was just, kind of what you would call post-romantic harmony. Romantic being in not the romance sense, but in in reference to the period of music history that people like Beethoven inhabited. Beethoven was one of these rare composers who kind of grew up in the classical period and was a student of Mozart and all of that. And then he pretty much started developing things harmonically and structurally around music at the time, and started pioneering this new kind of way of working, which was much more kind of, everything was big. You know, kind of classical orchestra was medium-sized, maybe about 60 musicians on the stage. So, you know, reasonable size. But Beethoven basically started adding to the orchestra, beefing up the string section, making them bigger, more woodwinds, different instruments in the woodwind section, more brass, more percussion. In the earlier classical period of, later Handel and Mozart and people like that, there was really only one guy, and he played timpani, and that was pretty much it. But by the time Beethoven was into his peak period of his career, when he was writing prolifically and writing some of the best music, I mean, by this point he'd lost his hearing, but prolifically writing fantastic music. The percussion section had, snare drums, bass drums, cymbals, triangles, glockenspiels, xylophones, and all of that had been added to the percussion section of the orchestra. And in fact, when you get to the 1812 overture, the percussion section included firearms. Yes, we're talking cannons. But that's kind of like a whole nother subject that I could spend several hours talking about, being kind of a bit of a musicologist on the side, music historian. But that's not what we're here to talk about, but that's kind of like the backdrop. So when I start talking about 13th chords, 11th chords, 9th chords, and variations thereof, your instinctive thought is that I'm talking jazz harmony, and you maybe are not into jazz. Maybe jazz is something you just don't like. Maybe you're just a rock and roll guy or girl, and maybe you're into EDM, or maybe you're into fairly middle of the road country music, and you probably think, this kind of harmony is never ever going to have a use for it. Well, actually, you never know, and I'll tell you why. A lot of particularly a lot of contemporary current country and western music incorporates a lot of extended harmony. Like, they will add nines to regular triadic chords, or they'll add a six, or they'll add, kind of an extension above a major seventh chord, like a major 9 chord. Stuff like that crops up all the time in contemporary country music now. And so it helps if you are a mix engineer, if you're a producer, if you're an arranger, as well as being a songwriter, composer. Knowledge of these extra intervals is going to be very, very useful. The broader your harmonic palette is, the better it is going to be for you as an artist, as a musician, as a songwriter, because it means you've got much more repertoire, much more to draw on, especially if an artist comes to you and says, hey, I want these kind of chords to be featured a bit more in the song. Can we put one of these in here, because I just think it would sound really cool. And if you don't know what it is, you could potentially lose that artist, or you could lose that client, and you don't want that. You want to be able to say, yes, absolutely, I know exactly what that is. So that's kind of by way of introduction into this subject. So hopefully you guys are going to dig this, and you're going to get into it. We've lost a couple of viewers, but that's okay. We've got a small crowd tonight, and I hope that this is something that is going to be helpful to you. So let's get into it. And I've got we've got the piano on, the Fender Rhodes kind of sound, but I can put this onto a standard piano because it might actually be easier for you to hear it if I do that. Hang on. So now we have the Steinway Concert Grand. There we go, Steinway Concert Grand with absolutely no reverb. So, let's get into it, and let's get into how harmony works. Most people will understand triads. What's a triad? You might be asking. A triad is a chord with 3 notes in it. So we would have a root, a major third, and a fifth for a major chord. Most people understand that, and then you flat the third to get a minor chord, and then you flat the fifth to get a diminished chord. And those are your kind of 3 main harmonic variations: major, minor, diminished, or major, minor, diminished, but you could also sharp the fifth instead, so go back to that major third. Instead of having the major fifth, we sharp it and we get an augmented chord. Now, augmented chords are really, really great because you can use these as a passing chord. So, for example, you can go like this. And it leads really, really neatly to a minor chord, to the 6th chord, to A minor. And then you can just keep doing that. You know, you can go. A lot of pop songs have this kind of thing going on now. So if somebody says, hey, can you make that a C major sharp 5 chord? If you don't know what that means, you're going to struggle. So this is where kind of what we're talking about tonight is kind of how you can alter the various parts or voices within a chord to get a different effect or a different sound. So in that case, we raised the 5th to get small crowd microaggression. Thank you, Dooley Still, for that terrific gag. Dooley, I don't know. You may be 6'5". I'm only 6'1". So, you know, I'm talking numeric rather than stature. I'm sure you're aware of that. So, major, augmented. So we've sharped the 5th, or you can flat the 5th. And get kind of like a diminished thing if you've got like a minor third as well. Okay, so those are your main sort of like triadic variations. Now, the more notes you add to the chord, the more variations of voicing you can have, and the more you can alter those notes. So, let's add to our major chord a major 7th, which is a B natural in the key of C. Okay, so if we flat that, we get that dominant 7 chord. Dominant 7 always leads to a new key, for the most part. In most kind of classical contexts or post-romantic contexts, a 5/7 or a C, or you know, just a 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord always leads to a new key. Okay, unless you're playing blues music or jazz or contemporary popular music, then you can do that all day, and you don't have to resolve it, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. But in a, you know, more kind of orchestral context, you'd have to resolve it. Okay, so that's the 7th chord. Now, you can of course make that a minor 7 by flatting the 3rd. And you can make it a diminished 7 chord by flatting the 5. Or you can sharp the 5 and make it an augmented 7. If I put the E flat back to an E, there you've got like your C7 augmented or C7 sharp 5, which kind of has a quite unique and distinct kind of sound to it. So use this one with care for a particular effect, maybe. Okay, so what can we do? Because since we're talking about extending above the octave, so we're talking about, there's our octave, there's our 7th, so we're adding to notes above that, above the 7th, okay? So a 9th chord would contain all of the notes in the 7th chord, plus a ninth. Okay, and then 11th chord, same deal, but you add the 11th to it. Okay, so I'm going to move down the octave a little bit so I can play this with two hands. There's your 11th chord, and then your 13th chord, you stack another third on top. Now obviously that's a lot of notes, and it requires two hands to play it. So you're thinking, hey, I'm not a piano player, I'm a guitar player. You know, I only have 6 strings. How the heck am I going to play a 9 or 10 note chord? Very easy. I'm going to show you how to do that. And actually it works well on piano as well. Simplify something complex, you keep the complexity, and you make it a lot easier to play. But you keep that nice, modern, complex sound. So, what do? Well, we need to do something called redaction. We need to take some notes out that we don't need. So in the case of a 9 chord, or anything basically about, that's a 7th with additions to it, we can take out unessentials. The 5th of a chord is kind of, once you're adding above the octave, the 5th becomes redundant. You don't really need it, so take it out. So now we've got a lot less notes to deal with. So we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4. And we've got a 9th chord, but with just 4 voices. Okay? So the most essential notes that you will ever need in any chord to create the correct and desired effect is the root, the 3rd, and the 7th. See, I've taken away the 5th altogether, and it still has the same effect as just a full C7 chord with the 5th in. If I take that out, it still has the same effect. So you can strip a 7th chord down, which is a 4-voice chord. You can strip that down to 3. So the most important notes are the root, the 3rd, and the 7th, whether that's a major 7th or a dominant 7th or a minor 7th. Okay? The 3rd, whatever variation of 3rd that is, and 7th, whether that's major or flat, those are the most important intervals, the most important voices you need in your chord, and anything else you add to that is in that context. So if I want a 13th chord, this is what I do, and this is what I advocate everybody do, is go root, 3rd, 7, 9, and then add the 13th on the top. Okay, so what's the 13th? How do I calculate what that is? Okay, so an octave is 8. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the next tone above that is going to be the 9, and then the next one above that is the 10th, and then the next note above that will be the 11th. Then the next one above that is technically the 12th, but we don't really worry about that because it never gets used like that. And then after that, it's the 13th. So it's an interval of a 13th apart. So there's the root. A 13th above that is an A. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So remember I said the essential notes are root, 3rd, and 7th, and anything you add to it. So there we have root, 3rd, 7th, and the 13th, and that is a 13th chord. Kirk asks, can you get a similar effect by changing the chord position as well, i.e. from first position to second position? Yes. Different inversions will create a different effect, because you will go from quite open voicing, which means the notes are far away from each other. So that's quite open because all the notes are quite far away from each other. But I can close that down and make all the notes nice and close by putting the 7th at the bottom, keeping my root on the bass note, putting the 7th at the bottom, put in, then the next note will be the 9th, and then next to that will be the major 3rd, and then next to that will be the 13th. So all of a sudden you've got this change in sound because you've got these voices nice and close together, and I've got the 13th on the top. Now I can close that down even more by keeping the 3rd and 9 and 7 close together, but then I can put the 13 at the very bottom, so directly underneath the 7th here. And you get a much more dissonant effect. Okay? And so let's say I decided to add an 11th to that chord. Well, that's going to clash with the major 3rd, which is a little ugly sounding. So what if I was to raise that 11th and make it a sharp 11th, so we play an F sharp instead of an F natural? Okay, so close voice, when I refer to chords as being close voiced, that's kind of what I mean. All those extensions to the chord that would normally be above the octave, I've dropped them down the octave so they're nice and close to the other chord tones. And you can get a really rich, nice effect doing it that way. But, you know, you can also get a nice effect this way. You know, just opening up the voicing a little bit can have one effect. Same chord, just a different voicing. Alright, so I hope everyone kind of understands that. Now, so I'm talking about distilling everything down to basic intervals so that you have only a few voices in the chord to make things easier for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you a really simple way to play a series of major 9 chords. Okay, so a major 9 chord is a chord that has a root, a 3rd, a major 7, and the 9th in there as well, either on top or in the middle somewhere. So I'm going to show you a really, really easy way to do it. And a lot of great songwriters in the modern period have made this very, very, very effective. I'm thinking of people like Sting, Stevie Wonder, Bob James, the composer of the theme for Taxi, the TV series. Let me think of some others. Steely Dan, Chicago, Earth, Wind & Fire, Blood, Sweat and Tears. All of those bands from like the 70s and into the 80s period made use of this a lot. Steely Dan in particular made use of this a lot. So what I'm going to show you is a really easy way to make a major 9 chord and make it really effective. So we're going to take a G major chord, but we're going to put a C in the bass note underneath it. And you've got the bare bones of a C major 9 chord. We've left out the major 3rd, and the reason why we've done that is to make it more ambiguous, I guess, would be my phrase for it. And Steely Dan made a lot of use of this, so kind of sounds okay with the kind of like the chords in root position. So G, B, D, A, C, E, A, C sharp, E, B, D sharp, F sharp, and then just shifting the bass note up and down. Okay, but what if we were to open the voicing up a little bit and put the right hand chord into a second inversion? So second inversion as opposed to root. So root inversion has the tonic, the root note of the chord at the bottom. First inversion has the major 3rd at the bottom. Second inversion has the 5th at the bottom. So D, G, and B. If I put the C at the bottom. And all of a sudden you are very definitely into the realms of Steely Dan. That's one of their favorite chord voicings. So you hear that a lot. You hear that come up in the title track to the Asia record. You hear it in the Royal Scam quite a lot. And you know, records like that from kind of like maybe Katy Lied as well, from like 1976, 1977, 78. And on those records, you hear those kind of chords quite a lot. All right, so that's how you make a major 9 chord. Just really easy, taking a G triad and putting the C bass note underneath. 2 mobile home chords. Exactly right, Dooley Still. Yep. But you also get it in peg as well. And where else would you get it? Josie, you know. Where you get this kind of figure going on. Hang on. You know, that kind of thing. You get that coming up in peg quite a lot. So that's how to make a G major 9 chord. And you can, if you want to make that into a 9 chord, you just turn our G major triad into a G minor 1. And you, all of a sudden you've got kind of like a 7 chord there with the 9 in there. But we're missing out the 3rd. If you want to put the 3rd in, that's what you'd get. Okay, so there are easy ways to make something sound a lot more complicated, and that's one of them, is to put a triad with a different bass note over the top. Same with 11th chords. An 11th chord would have the 7th and the 11th, which would be an F in the key of C, which sounds just like a C7 suspended, right? But you need to put the D in there, put the 9 in there. And that's your kind of 11th chord, which when you look at it on the piano, B flat, D, F, spells B flat major, right? With a C bass. And all of a sudden you've got a really simple way to make very complicated chords with just 3 notes in your right hand, 1 note in your left. All right? So I hope that has helped educate you a little bit more. I intend to go into this in a lot more detail in a series of videos. So if you are interested in that, then please drop me an email at johnny@johnnylipsonstudios.co.uk and let me know if that's something you'd be interested in me doing. And I'd be happy to start making some videos on that kind of thing too. So now we are at 36 minutes past, so I'm pretty much at that point now where we're ready to get into your questions. We have 13 people here now, so we've lost a few, but that again, that's okay. If this is not a subject that you're interested in, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. If you'd rather talk about mixing, stick some questions in the chat on mixing and we'll get into some mixing. Or if mastering is something you're interested in, again, stick some questions in there. Yep, songwriting, we can get into that as well. Buster is here. I think I know who Buster really is. G major 9 chord, where is the A? I'm getting lost on that. And the C in the bass, Would not that be C major 7, 9, C with the G triad on top? Yeah, it kind of is. It is C with a G triad on top, which is a mouthful to say, but it would be a C major 9 chord, because you have the major 7, and then you have the 5th of the chord, and there's the 9 right there. So B, G, D with the C bass. Kind of spells out a kind of major 9, no third. But, you know, if you really want to, you can put the third in there. And now you're spelling out an E minor 7 chord with a C in the bass. It does actually sound quite nice with the 9 and the third next door to each other. And then the 5th, and then the major 7 on the top. So yeah, that's kind of where the 9 is. The 9 is the 5th of the G major triad that you had at the top there in your right hand with the C in the bass. Now you have to admit, it does sound pretty darn cool, and you know, made particularly famous by Steely Dan in particular. But a lot of other people made use of that kind of thing as well. Buster says, my brain got fried. What were you calling the chord with the C in the bass? Sorry for my lameness. I played several chords with a C in the bass there, so it depends which one you're referring to. That one there, kind of, there are two ways of calling this. You can call this a C major 9. And it's just a particularly wide open, much more simplified voicing of the chord. Or you could call this G over C, and it's essentially the same thing. I see this written both ways. You know, when I get piano charts to play, I see that written both ways. Sometimes I see it as G over C, sometimes I see it as G major 9. And then my ear will tell me kind of how to voice the major 9, because I might voice it really quite complicated. I might play it like this. Sounds totally different, right? Because I've voiced everything completely different. Here I've got the G for G major 9. G, there's the 9, major third, 5, major 7 on top. Kind of sounds a little bit different. So yeah, and that's basically like a B minor 7 in the right hand, G in the bass. But yeah, that's G. That's also G major 9. So that's C major 9. Okay. Kirk says G over C major 9. G over C major 9. So C major 9 in my right hand and G in the bass. And that would be something like this. Which kind of, I don't know what that is. It's kind of like a G sus chord, I guess. But yeah, guess it depends on what the band, the bass in particular, is playing and what key you're in too. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, your ears should dictate all of this kind of stuff. You know, sometimes you'll find it's more about what is written on the chart or on the chord chart and what everybody else plays as well. But it's just a really simple way. And here's the thing. That kind of like triad with other bass note on the bottom is a really easy way for a guitar player to be able to play the same chords, to play the same complex chords, but just play them a lot easier. Okay? So on guitar, if you want to play a 13th chord, there's lots of ways to do it. I'll get my guitar. I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear this with where my mic is. But yeah, there's lots of ways. Again, it depends upon whether... Depends whether you've got a bass player in the band as well. So if you've got a bass player in the band, you don't need to play the root. You can leave the root out altogether and just play the top 3 notes. The 7, the 9, and the 13. Which is what I do. And that means I can strum the chord instead of, just kind of plucking them finger style. If I've got no bass player, then I have to play, I have to play all the notes. But if there's no bass player, I can... I'm free to kind of not play bass notes. And it means that I'm only playing 3 notes instead of 6. So, and that's why guitar players go, oh, I can't play a 13th chord. Because they automatically think they have to play every single note that makes up a 13th chord. No, you don't. You never need to. You never need to play like 10 or so notes. Because nobody really does that. Okay, so... And I'm not really a guitar player. I've just worked out those voicings from sitting at the piano and trying to find the notes on the neck, to be honest. So yeah, so it does make playing those kind of voicings a lot easier. Let's see. C over G. Kirk says, oh no, I think I meant C over G major 9. The C bass because of the inversion. So G major 9 in my right hand and C in the bottom. Okay. So if I play just like G major 7 with a C in the bass, you know what you get? What you kind of get there is like you get that you get that C major 9 kind of sound from the G over C. But with the F sharp there, you kind of get a sharp 11 in there as well. So I hope that helps. But yeah, you would with the C bass, you kind of you by and largely extrapolate your nomenclature for your chord from whatever the bass note is doing. So sometimes that will mean, if the bass player is playing an E and you have written a C chord, then you're playing C over E. Or, if it's B flat and the bass player is playing a D. Okay, so you always kind of work out what the nomenclature is, what the chord is from the bass part. And that's a concept that goes all the way back to the Baroque period. Because in the Baroque period, there were no written out keyboard parts, even though you had a harpsichord in your small little chamber group as it was at the time. the small Baroque orchestra would have a harpsichord and a cello, or, mostly a cello. Rarely a bass, but a cello and the harpsichord. And the idea was that there was no written out harmony part. So what they would have is they'd have something called figured bass, which basically means that the bass part would be written out for the cello player, and then underneath the bass part were numbers that told the harpsichord player intervals for he or she to play that were above the given notes in the bass part. So, for example, if you saw 6/4 and the bass note was a C, well, you'd count up 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you count up a 4 from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that was the kind of note you would get, or 5, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. So basically, it told you need a 6 and you need a third, and that's how you got. That's how instead of writing C major or F major, that's how they did it. Did it with figured bass. So there you go. Little bit of a completely unnecessary history lesson there. We're down to about 10 people now, so I think we're going to wrap this up fairly soon, folks. Unless you guys have got some burning questions. Buster says, I got lost with the G major 9 over C because there was no A for the major 9 for the G. Yeah, there was. Because it was how did I do it? So it's kind of like to get the C major 9, it's a G triad over C, right? And you can get the third in there if you want. Okay, and to make the same on G major 9, tell you, the classical composer, or he was a kind of modern era composer, 20th century composer. There's a piece called Gymnopédie, I think it's called, which is an impressionist piece of music. A lot of people have used it for ice dancing or that kind of thing, and it features a lot of kind of major 9 and major 7 chords, and it's a completely classical piece of music. So there you go. So yeah. Kirk says, thank you, I need to brush up on my inversions. George Marshall is here and says, AGT coming on in 10 minutes on cable. Okay, I don't know what that is. I don't know what AGT stands for, I'm afraid. But thank you anyway. And yeah, we've got officially we've got 10 minutes to go, but I did kind of put out the advertisement for this show kind of a little late, but pretty much every Sunday, unless I put out something that says there is no show, there pretty much always will be. So you always just need to come and congregate in the channel and wait until you see the live thing go up. Until YouTube figure out scheduling and get that working properly. That's how we will have to do it. Buster says, what really became areas for confusion for me when studying this was what the chord actually was called. Passing chords, key changes, polychords, all determined what it might actually be. Yeah, there is kind of quite a lot of that kind of thing going on. Especially when you start to add into the mix how Nashville session musicians write out chord charts. They don't write out G major 7, B flat major 7, F sharp minor 9. They don't write those things out. They use numbers, which is, to me, I find that really, really interesting because it goes back to, kind of like the Baroque and early classical way of writing out harmony parts. Like, for example, Bach, although he would write figured bass parts, he would also write Roman numerals. So you would know, hey, this is chord 2 going to chord 5 going to 1. Well, hang on, that's a 2-5-1. What key are we in? We're in B flat. Okay. C minor 7, F7, B flat. That's a 2-5-1 in B flat. So Nashville musicians are familiar with these kind of, with those numbers. Yes, exactly. Nashville gives you the key and then the numbers. And the great thing about that is that if the singer is not comfortable in a particular key, but you know the number system, and everyone says, okay, we're not going to do it in E, we're going to do it in E flat. No problem. Everybody just shifts down a semitone. And, they have no trouble with the chord chart, because the chord chart is completely and utterly movable, because it's based upon the intervallic relationships surrounding the key. So if you're in B flat, then 1 is B flat and 2 is C. 3 is D, 4 is E flat, 5 is F, 6 is G, 7 is A, and so what those chords are going to be based on that. So if it's chord 6 in B flat, well, that's going to be a G minor chord, and so on and so forth. So 2 is 1 is major, 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is dominant, 6 is minor, 7 is diminished, and that's kind of how it works in major keys. Minor keys, there are 1 or 2 variations on that idea. And if you want to write specifically a minor chord that maybe doesn't belong, so maybe you want to do chord 4 minor in the key of B flat, which would be E flat minor, where you'd write 4 minus in the Nashville numbering system, or -4. I can't remember which way the minus goes. Is it before or after? I can never remember which. But that's kind of how that works. And so that's really interesting, because it directly relates back to Roman numerals and Bach chorale harmony and all of that fun stuff that I spent far too many hours studying and learning when I was at university. When I wasn't in a studio at an SSL console learning how to mix, I was studying Bach chorale harmony and the music of John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and I immersed myself in all of that stuff. And so tonight is kind of like the result of all of that stuff. So there you go. So Mike Neighbor was the direct inspiration for this show. So I hope he said to me that he was going to watch this on replay. So Mike, if you're watching, I hope that this kind of helps you. It may not. If it doesn't, then that's okay. We can do follow-ups. You just need to reach out to me with any questions you got. And the same goes for everybody else here, all 11 of you that are still here. If you've still got questions about, I'm not really sure about how that major 9 thing works, I'm not really quite sure how, stripping everything down to a triad and then putting a different bass note under it works. If you're kind of still not 100% sure on how that stuff works, because I can't really go into it in a load of depth in a show like this, then again, if you would like me to make a video that goes into much more depth, or like a tutorial product that maybe you guys would be interested in purchasing, if harmony is something you really want to get a bit of a grasp on, then yes, I can make something that's an hour to 2 hours long that goes into a little bit more depth, and happy to sell it for a very reasonable price if that's something you're up for. So yeah, Kirk says very interesting but makes absolutely perfect sense. Well, that's good to hear. I'm very pleased that the whole thing makes perfect sense to you. That's fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of the harmony thing that I wanted to talk about tonight. So we will be continuing the Paper Deity series this week on Thursday. The next video will go up. And if you've been following along, we've done a little bit of mixing in mono in the last episode, and we started getting some reverbs and delays going. So this week is going to be looking at parallel compression. And parallel compression has become kind of a part of what I do mixing-wise. It's not something I always do. Sometimes it just doesn't need it. Like if I'm doing like a jazz quartet thing, I don't need parallel compression. I barely need compression, to be honest. I use compression basically just to control things in a jazz context, or in a classical chamber ensemble. Again, I'm hardly using compression, just a little bit, just to control the peaks a little bit, and that's kind of all I do. But in a kind of rock, pop, dance, EDM, all of that kind of stuff, yeah, parallel compression is something that has become pretty much a necessary part of my mixing methodology over maybe the last 3 or 4 years since I kind of started doing it. I can't even remember where I learned it, to be honest. But yeah, it's something I started doing in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I don't know whether it will apply to Paper Deity. It may not. I just smacked the mic, sorry about that. So we're going to devote that particular video to experimenting with it and trying it and seeing what it does for the drums, what it does for the vocals, and we may decide, yeah, we don't need it, or we may decide, hey, actually brings a bit of life to the vocal, brings the vocal really forward, brings the kick and the snare drum really in your face. Might be the kind of thing that Paper Deity needs. We'll have to try it. We'll have to wait and see. So if you're interested in that, the video will go up on Thursday, some point during the day, or some point, yeah. It's probably going to be evening time, UK time, because my kids are on Easter break. So yeah, that's going to be that, and then we'll be back here. So if you've got an idea for a topic for the show, like tonight, this was Mike Neighbour's question. So if you've got something that you would like to see a whole show devoted to, again, please reach out to me. You can do that by Facebook Messenger, or you can do it via email, johnny@johnnylichtenstudios.co.uk, or you can reach out to me on Skype, Instagram. I'm there, or you can direct message me on Twitter. I'm there as well. There's a whole range of ways in which you can get in touch with me, and it'd be really cool, basically, just to start featuring kind of things that you want to see me talk about. Okay, and please do invite your friends to these kind of shows if you think they're going to be useful to them. Let them know that we do this every Sunday, and that'd be really cool. So if this live stream has been useful to you, please do hit that like button. We got 6 likes already, and that's very cool. I appreciate that. And if you want to hit the super chat button, then please do. We've got just a couple of minutes left of the show, so if super chat is your thing, then please do. Some loose change coming my way would be greatly appreciated. It would help a lot to keep me making Sunday night live streams. And I enjoy doing these, and hopefully they are of benefit to you guys. It would have been nice to have had more people in here, but maybe we didn't get the announcement out in time, so a lot of people may have forgotten. And it's Easter as well, so I take all of that into account. Okay, everybody, I'm going to bid you all a very good night, and I'm going to thank you for coming out tonight. It's been nice to have actually a nice little gathering. So I'll see you all on Thursday on the video. Good night.
I know I'll never send, when all habitual dalliance will finally end. Then crustiness, my friend and foe, to oblivion you will go, belonging to tomorrow, belonging to tomorrow. I'll make that journey out to Paradise Falls. And on all the stifling lethargy, time will now be called. Then Christmas, the snake-eyed schmo, to Gehenna town you will go, belonging to tomorrow.